Thank you all for being here. This is really, really amazing, and to have James here with me today is really special. We have this weird thing where we're both really instructional technologists, learning scientists. My background's in educational psychology and instructional systems. We've seen a lot of this, and we've seen a lot of this hype, and we're supposed to talk today, James, about in 10 years, what do we regret? But I want to start with something maybe more positive for you to begin with. You had something big happen to you in the California state system, where a bunch of regents got together and said, hey, you know what would be great? If we just gave everybody ChatGPT. And that's for the entire system. Tell me a little bit about that moment in time, because that was quite a while ago. You guys were really first movers. So before we get into our regrets, what did that opportunity present, and how did you and your colleagues react to that?
Yeah, you know, the conversation really shifted from whether to use AI to how to use AI when we provisioned ChatGPT to everybody in the California State University system. Thankfully, at San Diego State, we had already rolled out this survey that Julie mentioned, and that was really meant to kind of cut through the noise. When working with faculty, they don't respond well, we've found, to anecdote, so we needed to provide data to help them think through this moment. And we had that data, and we were able to look at, the survey asks about tool usage, it asks about opinions relative to AI, for instance, how students see AI relative to their careers. And then maybe most importantly, it asks about expectations for the university. What expectations do these community members, students in particular, have for us as an institution? So we've been able to really cut through the noise with that survey data, and it's been really helpful for us to really measure the velocity of change over time relative to tool usage like ChatGPT. But when we first rolled out the survey in 2023, tools like DeepSeek and some of the other emerging technologies weren't even around. Yeah. So we've been adapting that tool section, but the questions have actually remained identical because this is part of a longitudinal research study, and for us to be able to compare and contrast year over year, we have to ask the same questions. Yeah. Just this last fall, we rolled that survey out to the entire California State University system. As Julie mentioned, we had almost 100,000 responses. Over 80,000 students responded. More than 1 in 5 of our faculty across the entire state responded to the survey, and almost a third of our staff responded to the survey. So really using that data to inform our strategy, and happy to talk more about that. And by the way, my big regret is not investing in NVIDIA stock. In 10 years from now, I'm really going to regret that. So.
Yeah, I have a similar feeling about cardboard packaging, that I should have invested in that.
Yeah, Amazon.
But so you say that, so you roll out this survey, and you start to find a couple of things that I think a lot of us are finding. One is that students, in particular, are very dubious when we give them tools. And it turns out that sometimes many faculty are dubious. What did the survey tell you, and what did you find, and how did you react to that?
Yeah, I mean, the students feel like these tools are being provisioned to entrap them, to catch them cheating, which is absurd. We're providing them with the tools that they'll be expected to use in the world outside of school. So one of the things that we heard from students, and quick little story on that, kind of on a personal level. By the way, I've got my wife, who is a UT Longhorn alumni, and my mother-in-law, who's a UT Longhorn alumni, out here in the audience. My mother-in-law calls me her Longhorn-in-law, because I'm a big UT fan. So my son, who grew up in San Diego, is actually up going to school at UC Berkeley right now, and he sent me a text that his buddy sent him, who is a San Diego State student studying mechanical engineering, and it was a meme from a social media platform called Yik Yak. You all are too old to know what that is, probably, but on the meme is a caricature of some guy named James Frazee, literally said that, pulling a Trojan horse, and it's some cartoon character that kind of looked like me. And inside the Trojan horse, popping their head out, was my boss, the president of San Diego State University, Adela de la Torre. And on it, it said, "They think we're stupid." And so this was the kind of rhetoric that we were seeing on tools like Reddit, where, especially when that ChatGPT rollout came in. By the way, we had already been providing Gemini, Notebook LM, Copilot, a number of other AI tools. Adobe, we're a big Adobe Creative Cloud campus, so we had Adobe Firefly, we have Zoom AI Companion. We'd been providing AI tools for years at this point before ChatGPT rolled out. Yeah. But when ChatGPT rolled out, they thought, oh, they're doing this to catch us cheating. What we did with that information was we actually worked with our Associated Student Government leaders and our legal counsel to put together a generative AI privacy statement, which applies not only to students, but to faculty and staff as well, because the faculty also have legitimate concerns about surveillance and how this data is being used and their intellectual property. And in that privacy statement, it's very succinct. It's about a paragraph long. We say, in no uncertain terms, we're not accessing, monitoring, or tracking your use of these tools, period. And then we worked with the Associated Student leaders to create a little video. I mentioned that earlier. Yeah. It's about a minute long. It's less than 90 seconds. Sharing that with the student community so that they know that their privacy, this trust is so important right now when using these tools. There is a caveat. I will put my vice president of IT hat on, that if we're compelled with a lawful order from a law enforcement agency, just like we would with your email system, if somebody thinks you're building a bomb in your dorm room, they're going to have access to everything, right? But that's different. And that's not what the students were worried about. They were worried about their faculty tracking their use of these tools. And really for us, this is really important. We really felt strongly from the get-go that this is not a policy problem. In fact, we have an AI policy. It's called our academic integrity policy. Right. Yep. This is a learning design challenge. And that's why we've invested so heavily in faculty development. The first micro-credential we rolled out was actually not for students, it was for faculty. We've since adapted that, and now that micro-credential is a requirement for all of our first-year students. They get a digital badge, verifiable badge that they can put on their LinkedIn profile that can really differentiate them when they're in that job market, showing that they're using these tools responsibly. And I could talk more about the micro-credential, but I think that's really been part of the story at San Diego State.
Well, and you've been at San Diego State since '99?
Yep.
So you've spent 25 years watching this. And I got to, my first higher ed position was '98 at Penn State University as an instructional designer. And you and I have seen, like, you told me a story at the table about when you were in grad school. We have to talk a little bit about that. But we've seen these explosive moments a handful of times. Do you believe that the lessons learned through the dawn of the internet, mobility, remember Napster?
Oh yeah.
Peer-to-peer, all of these things that seemed amazing on one hand but terrifying on the other hand, have you taken some strategies or some things that you've learned from that time to apply to your systematic approach to what you're doing with AI now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think taking a very measured approach, using data to inform strategy and using those insights. But the most exciting thing for me, Cole, and I started teaching at San Diego State in 1999 in the Educational Technology Department, so had that experience. In fact, I'm still teaching in the Ed Leadership program. I've got a doctoral class right now that's just wrapping up this semester. And the thing that is so exciting about AI for me is it's creating space to talk about active learning and what we know about how people learn. And it turns out, if you give students very authentic, complex tasks that require the use of AI, just like it will be required in their professional life, you can 10x the expectations. You can get them interacting with one another and with the content in much deeper ways than were ever possible previously. You can use the generative AI tools as kind of a provocateur, a sparring partner when you're testing your assumptions. And you can use this moment to scaffold conversations with people about learning science and the opportunities to engage in this content at a much deeper level. And it's just like, Cole, when we were in the late 1990s, and this thing called the World Wide Web was out, and everybody was worried about what? They were worried about misinformation, people using it to cheat, all the same concerns we're hearing today.
Yeah, Wikipedia was blocked, right, because it was a website that people could contribute to. I remember having graduate courses in teaching with the internet, right? And so that's 96, 97 as this thing's happening. There was this little thing called WebQuest. Do you remember that?
I sure do. Yeah. In fact, my dissertation focused on that. So Bernie Dodge, who is the father of the WebQuest model, was a real influential faculty member for me when I was in graduate school and was my dissertation advisor. So very familiar with the WebQuest model and the Jigsaw model, which he built upon, which was Elliot Aronson. From where?
Right here.
From UT Austin, right? So that's somehow in my pedigree, it leads back there to that.
Well, and what I'm wondering is, where are those conversations in the academy happening now? AI feels like it is a horizontal structure where our College of Educations really took hold of the vertical conversation around the internet. Do you see any one field being responsible, more so or less so, for the use of AI, either in authentic learning tasks, in active learning, just in design in general? Or do you think that this is really something that all of our disciplines need to be thinking about from an instructional perspective?
Yeah, I think it absolutely transcends all disciplines. It was like your dean from the College of the law school here was talking about, you're doing a disservice to students if you're not exposing them to this profoundly disruptive technology. They really need to know how to use these tools very critically. You need to make sure that there's an emphasis on independent judgment and validating the content, because these tools are incredibly sycophantic, and they are going to tell you what they think you want to hear, and students, are just going to gobble that up unless you prepare them to be more actively engaged in unpacking that content with one another in different ways. So, yeah, I think it really does transcend disciplines, Cole.
My son's a freshman here at the university, and one of the things he did when he first got his hands on Claude Code was he created his own version of Canvas that pulled in content and organized his notes. It has a calendar system. My belief is learning is a social endeavor, and he uses that platform as a study partner. As a CIO, maybe this leads to some of our regrets in the future. What do you see on the horizon when students take real control over their learning and start building their own applications that may have to run in our environments? Like, that's something that's really coming to the forefront with us right now. Is these tools are so easy to build with. What we're beginning to see is this need to have what we call a deployment pipeline in the biz, but a way for them to get that from their laptop into a place where they can interact with each other or themselves with the technology. Is that something you're beginning to see percolate?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in our micro-credentials, we're having to now, you're never done with these things. They can't be evergreen. The first version of the micro-credential in 2023 has changed quite a bit to the one that's here available now in 2026, the faculty version as well as the student and staff versions. And agentic AI wasn't a thing in 2023, right? And so now, how are you making sure that these you're managing these non-human identities? We've seen
we've been talking about this a lot.
As a concern, when they have access to sources of information that may be sensitive in nature. So I think there's a lot of governance that needs to be done around that, but it's a balancing act, because you don't want to stifle creativity with, you talk about students, but it's really our staff who may be the biggest beneficiaries of these tools and these agentic operational things that you can do as far as a workflow, so that it frees them up before. People have been talking this morning about the toil, right? The stuff that you hate doing and how you can start there. Well, there's, especially for our faculty, they didn't become a faculty member to do administrative tasks, right? Because of the love of the discipline, their domain knowledge, their interest in the research, they're interested in helping people learn. But some of the kind of day-to-day stuff that just drives us nuts, you can move to these tools when done responsibly. So that's all just to say, I think, Cole, one of the things that we need to do is provide the community with lots of examples, because I don't think people are aware of some of the possibilities. And so we have at San Diego State something we call the AI in Action video series, where we feature both faculty and staff, and we want to start adding some examples from students. We've had several submissions from students, but it turns out they've been all non-examples that we haven't been comfortable sharing with the community just yet. We have a group. I should also say we have a long history of providing fellowships to faculty, and we have a faculty member from each of our colleges who has a fellowship with the IT organization. We call it One IT at San Diego State, so very much like here at UT, where it's all of the different groups that are together. In our case, academic technology as well. And that those fellows have been instrumental in this work, creating that survey instrument, analyzing the results, publishing a lot of scholarship on this stuff that we've done at San Diego State, creating the micro-credentials, creating faculty development initiatives. So for instance, over winter break, this past winter break, we did a program where we recruited a faculty member from every one of our undergraduate majors. We've got more than 100 undergraduate degree programs. Large, by the way, San Diego State's about 44,000 students, the largest California State University system school. It's not as big as UT, admittedly. Everything's bigger in Texas, right? But large campus, very complex, and we wanted representation from all of our undergrad programs because of that patchwork of expectation and that lack of coherence that we're seeing across disciplines, and the fact that you can walk into your 9 o'clock history class and be encouraged to use a tool like ChatGPT to brainstorm on an assignment, and then you go to your 10 o'clock sociology class and you could be expelled for doing the exact same thing. Right? That's extremely stressful for our students, and the anxiety is profound. And so we put together this experience over winter break where we recruited a faculty member from every department. It had to be a faculty member who was going to teach a major required course for multiple semesters. Their chair had to endorse that, and they were paid. Super important sign of respect to show that their labor is valuable. And they were also given the message that they're not alone in terms of taking an activity in that major required course and reimagining it, retrofitting it for this new reality. And then, as part of the deliverable for that, they were expected to record a short reflective video, less than 3 minutes, had to be less than 3 minutes, talking about what you did, why you did it, and what were the outcomes. And the idea there, Cole, was to have that contribute to the AI in Action video series, because the biologists don't care what the historians are doing. They want to hear from other biologists. And the chemists want to hear from other chemists, economists, so on and so forth, criminal justice, whatever it might be. So now we've got this growing body of evidence of how people are using these tools within the fabric of their curriculum. Now this summer, we're doing a program called Leading AI-Ready Programs, where we're working with the curriculum committee chair and the department chair or school director, and they're going through a 20-hour facilitated experience to map their program degree learning outcomes. They're going to look at their accrediting body. They're going to look at their degree learning outcomes at, let's say, anthropology, and figure out where AI fits. We're not telling them where it fits. We're creating space for the conversation among the faculty. And then they'll come out of that experience. We actually have a toolkit, which y'all can have. It's a little, I'm not supposed to call it a mini course in Canvas, but I just did. But it's a set of resources to scaffold those conversations. And then you kind of just take a couple big steps back and let the faculty do their thing. But it's really important that there's greater coherence, because right now the preparation for our students is super uneven. And we don't want just our computer science students to leave San Diego State with a deep understanding of how to use these tools responsibly. So a lot of important work being done there.
So it sounds like you've focused very heavily on the integration of the technology in action, in pedagogy and instruction. Let's start to think about the question we're being asked here today. 18 months ago, where would you have moved slightly differently had you had the opportunity? I mean, I know that I and my team have made investments, decisions, missteps, corrective action, all in a very compressed time period. So let's not even think about 10 years from now. Over the last 18 months, what do you think are some things that we're going to look back at and say, boy, if we could have a do-over, that'd be really fun?
Yeah. You know, for me, I think the move to the OpenAI license, I would have liked us seen, liked the system. Indeed, all segments of California higher education, the community colleges, the California state universities, and the University of California schools. By the way, San Diego State's a bit like UT Austin in terms of being the flagship of the system. We're the only R1 designated school within the California State University system. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is probably going to be soon in that same group. But very different. Each one of those community colleges, CSUs, UCs, they each have their unique culture. I would have loved all of those segments to come together and do a bake-off of all of the tools because, you know, I think you made a really good bet with Anthropic. And you know, the tools are going to change. The only thing I can guarantee is that everything will change. But I would have liked to see more community engagement in that process so that more people had a voice in that decision. It was a $17 million contract. I mean, it's a significant investment. And you know, I think that would have, I think, helped with buy-in from the community. Because there's been quite a bit of pushback from members of the community who are uncomfortable with that decision, which it's unfortunate because they're conflating their concerns about Sam Altman with generative AI, you know, and so it's getting in the way. There's a tension there. So that's something I would have changed.
And that's hard to differentiate right now. I mean, we live in a pretty bifurcated world where half the world thinks this and half the world thinks that. We had some very nervous moments as we were trying to make selections with what's gone on with Anthropic and the Department of Defense and some other things where we've had to say, boy, our researchers are really talking to us this way, our students are showing us this, but we're not sure how that shakes out in an environment where the politics of the politics matter, which is sort of fascinating. I've not had that in my career where a technology decision is tied to really government influence in a way. It's pretty wild.
Well, we have in the California State University something called the AI Workforce Acceleration Board, which is a really powerful group of industry folks as well as leaders within the California State University. There's representation from our California State Student Association, which is the student government folks from across the system, the California Faculty Association, the University Senate of the California State University, and industry leaders from, it's really a kind of a who's who, AWS, Adobe, of course, OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, IBM. I mean, there's all the big hitters are there, LinkedIn. And that has been really powerful for us in terms of kind of thinking about workforce readiness. 35 of the top 50 AI companies in the world are headquartered in California, but it turns out we can't get the talent we need inside of California, let alone the entire United States. We're having to go abroad to get the talent we need. So that group is really focused on making sure that we're preparing students that can come into these organizations and continue to let us thrive as a nation and certainly the state moving forward. And that's been really powerful as far as thinking about, okay, what are you looking for in an employee at Microsoft, at Google, at AWS, at these companies that are really driving technology forward. And that's been helpful for us as far as thinking about these micro-credentials. And so we're working on something right now we're calling AI for All. And that will be, we're pilot testing it within the Community College District in San Diego this summer with the intention of making that available to all Californians, and specifically the Californians who are getting unemployment benefits. So this work is being sponsored with the California Secretary of Labor, and the intention is to make this a requirement for anybody who's getting unemployment benefits. You'll have to get this micro-credential to get your check. And the idea is that if you don't have these skills, if you don't know how to use AI responsibly, you're going to be at a disadvantage when you're competing for a job, certainly in California, but I think anywhere in the country today.
Yeah, I don't remember the politics being this thick around Blackboard versus Canvas.
No.
Right? You know, we thought that those were really complicated.
It shows that people see this as, you know, it's a national security consideration. It's a you know, economic consideration. It's a basic literacy now that we need to make sure that we're providing. I mean, I've been framing AI as an academic capability at San Diego State. That way, it's not an IT project.
Yeah.
It's got to be, and this speaks to the importance of the strategic partnership with the Provost's office and the importance of communicating what the different organizations, especially a university as large as ours, so that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. And that's why events like this one, big shout out to you for having this event. And thank you to all of you who took time from your busy schedules to be here today. It's a really big deal. And I think it just speaks to how forward-thinking you are here.
Well, I mean, if we think about regrets, one of mine over the last 18 months has not been able to activate as much of the community in this conversation as I would have liked. And I think that I shouldn't be, because we all know the adoption and diffusion cycle of these emerging technologies. They take time, but somehow we have to get out of the long tail of the conversation and start to move up the vertical, ladder. And I think the relationship with good systems in the Office of Academic Technologies gives my team an opportunity to focus on our lane. The way that my position here is designed is to be the infrastructure and strategy. And I'm really pleased that, approaching Ken from Good Systems and having him go, absolutely, this is the right kind of opportunity at the right time. And with Julie, to be able to lean on them, I mean, they're the ones that create the scaffolding around the way we should be thinking about AI. What I'm trying to figure out with this team is, how do we leverage 3 separate organizations and bring this momentum to campus in an organized and structured way? And it's tough at a big distributed place like this. This is new muscle, I think, that we're developing at UT Austin, where we don't have 3 separate concurrent tracks that take away from one another, but they try to merge and come together. And that's where I see the power of this partnership that we're building here, is in this, the focusing of the band of light instead of what we've always done, which is diffuse it across campus in a strange way. And then we have people like Bobby Chesney, who sits over here and talks about the jagged edge of frontier models. And so we have these amazing champions. How have you activated your most important voices on your campus to overcome that idea? I mean, you and I both know, like, STEM faculty want to talk to STEM faculty. Faculty want to hear from faculty. Staff want to hear from staff. Students want to hear from students. What are some strategies you're thinking about in that activation stage?
Yeah, I think, one of the things, and, you're a national model here at UT, as usual. And it's because of academic leaders like Bobby, who, his idea of having a competition
like a law school hackathon.
Bring people out of the shadows and really recognize and celebrate those people who are doing powerful things with AI. That's to be commended. I think anything that you can do like that will go a long way. One of the things that we've done that was new in 2023, so we have this long history of providing fellowships to faculty. We've been doing that since the early 2000s, and it's part of a philosophy that we have that is that faculty development should be by faculty for faculty. So we first provided fellowships to faculty who were helping other faculty move courses online. These were faculty who had experience teaching in an online modality, maybe in a hybrid modality. And we had those folks help other faculty who were teaching these high demand kind of gateway or bottleneck courses. And we wanted to make those courses available online during the summer because the metrics that matter for people like my boss are time to degree, graduation rates, retention, all of those things that are important metrics, because our mission, like yours at UT Austin, is all about access, right? And if those people are kind of clogging up the system, we're not able to fulfill that mission. So we've got this long history of providing fellowships to faculty. That has been extremely well received. The faculty get course release, which is reassigned time to free them up to do that work. So that compensation is really essential. And they're kind of our red team too. They pressure test our systems. They're a sounding board. You know, faculty never have any qualms telling you where, you know, things don't make sense in no uncertain terms. And so we invite that from our faculty fellows. For the first time in 2023, we'd never done this before. We provided student fellowships. We have student employees. In fact, we would be dead in the water without our student employees in the IT division. We have hundreds of them. And they end up, it's a pipeline to our staff. I'd say maybe 60% of our professional staff are former student assistants.
Yeah.
And we would never get people that are this talented and this highly qualified had it not been from recruiting them through that student pipeline. But this was different. These fellowships were very competitive. We had hundreds of applications. Of course, it's an AI fellowship. You want to put that on your resume,
it has to be
right?
on the resume.
So we use a tool called Handshake for that. I don't know if you're using something like that here, but just we got overwhelmed with students who wanted to be our AI fellows. And so those students actually helped us back in 2023 create that survey instrument. And they also have been really influential in terms of, like, one of the students who now works for Lockheed Martin. He had a summer internship at NASA. He tells you about the chops this kid had. Colin was his name. He, the very first semester we started work with him, we said, hey, can you do an inventory of all your syllabi and tell us how many people are talking about generative AI? He had one of his 5 classes that said anything about AI, and it was that it was forbidden. Well, between that and the data from the survey, one of the, Julie mentioned that quote, just tell it, please. They were very polite. Please just tell us what you expect and be clear about it. That was a qualitative, kind of open-ended response from the students. But the data is exceedingly clear. The students are confused. They don't know what's expected of them. So we use that data and input from our AI student fellows to have a conversation with the University Senate, the University Senate at San Diego State is who passes academic policy. It's not the administration, it's the University Senate, and it's a faculty-led organization. And I honestly believe, Cole, if it wasn't for the data from that survey, this would have never happened. But by unanimous consent, and it was late 2024, early 2025, I believe, the University Senate passed a policy that required all faculty, and I mean all faculty, to have a syllabus statement. Didn't say what the syllabus statement was. It could be, whatever you wanted it to be, because you have the freedom to do that, but you had to make your disposition clear to your students. And again, if it wasn't for those student fellows, if it wasn't for that data from the survey, that would have never happened. And it's been really helpful, I think, for our community.
As I'm sitting here and I'm watching you answer these questions, I'm also looking out at the crowd, and I'm seeing so many people either taking notes or nodding at some of these things. And what strikes me is that this is sort of basic blocking and tackling. Just because it's AI doesn't mean that we have to reinvent the way that we think about this. I mean, accessibility has followed the same sort of arc where it becomes an issue, we have to address it, there's policy, you have to work with faculty to have statements, you build offices across campus. I've been trying to talk to my staff about this thing that, we don't need new rules or governance in specific spaces because we have acceptable use policies. Yep. We have academic integrity policies.
Privacy.
Right? It all exists. And every time one of these waves comes, teams like ours are asked to do this work when really, if you scale it back down, you can get down to the challenges. When you can lean, Julie and I had a conversation recently about governance, and we started talking about, well, what if students use their laptop to do, well, that's an acceptable use policy. Well, what if they cheat? Well, that's academic integrity. What does it look like when it begins to move so much faster and outpaces the knowledge that you and I have gained, the wisdom, let's call it the wisdom of dealing with these kinds of evolutions? But this is a revolution.
Yeah.
Like, what does it look like when the things that we've used in the past to scaffold our own services and business are being outpaced by the people around us, where we can't get our arms around it, right? Technology moves so much faster than policy. But 18 months ago, I tried to do a deal with OpenAI, and they wanted to charge me almost as much as what they charged
For the whole system.
the whole system.
Yeah.
Right?
We're 500,000 students
Yeah.
versus 55,000 or whatever you are.
So, like, I'm beginning to see the community start to sprint a little bit out in ahead, not in mass, but in certain areas. Is that a regret that we'll have about finding new ways to put our arms around that, or is it lean on those old structures that we have?
Well, I think across higher ed, we really need to band together. Institutions like ours, which can be very influential, systems of higher education, like I mentioned, the different segments of California higher education. I would put K-12 in there too. I think they've got a lot of work ahead of them, especially at the secondary level where these students are, I think about it like I think of social media and the regrets we have, look where that has gotten us, right? Students can't look up now. They're just in the zone there. And what I would say is if we don't teach our learners how to be critical consumers of this technology, who will?
Right.
And it will be social media all over again, right?
That scares me more than anything, because I spent a good part of my career looking at how social media was going to positively influence teaching and learning, and it's been a big disappointment.
Absolutely.
Quite
It's been a disaster. It's a mental health crisis, in fact. It's worse than that. It's horrifying.
Yeah, and mental health is one of the largest challenges. I got to sit down with John Dalton, our Vice President for Student Affairs, last week on our podcast, and the mental health question is the one that keeps he and his staff awake at night. Yep. And when our teams think about it, and Julie and I have talked about it with Sage and other tools, how students are reacting to AI as a conversational counselor is very concerning. And if I look back in 10 years and say, what was one of my regrets? Like, my mom was the director of the counseling center at Bloomsburg University when I was a kid. Like, I grew up with phone calls at 2 in the morning and her having to leave and go do things. And that's always in the back of my mind, that what are we doing, not on the career projection, the career directionality or the academic, but what are we doing to put the guardrails around some of those conversations? That's one of my regrets, I think, that I'll look back on this.
I think it's a civic responsibility that we have as an institution of higher education in preparing our young people, the people who are going to care for us here in the not too distant future, to be able to use these tools wisely.
Yeah.
And again, I'm back to lots of examples. They need lots of examples of how to do that well. They're not going to do that without some serious scaffolding, and that's on us.
Well, James, I know I've grilled you, and Casey's giving me the questions from the crowd portion of the show. So we'll come back. We'll say our big regret right at the end. That'll be our big reveal.
Okay,
so think
just
carefully.
Kudos to you, Cole. I mean, the transparency that you have here, and the podcast that he just mentioned. Other CIs don't do that. Okay, that's like, to put yourself out there like that, and that's brave.
It's
and
scary.
So, just want to give you a big shout out.
Thank you. I appreciate that, James. And look at that. All right, let's take some questions. James and I are both willing to sit and stare at you and make you uncomfortable until you raise your hand. So anyone, we got one?
Thank you for that talk. So one thing that was kind of a theme that we've heard a lot today is how rapidly things are changing. I mean, you mentioned the micro-credential from 2023 that's more or less obsolete and completely new now, or had to evolve a lot. So that points to kind of our education, what we're teaching students, and how rapidly the skills are changing in the working environment, what they're looking for in the future. So with that in mind, thinking like 10 years from now, how well do you think the kind of higher education model of just a 4-year condensed learning experience will hold up versus having to maybe transition more to like a lifelong learning sort of idea?
Well, I'll let James talk about the micro-credential and things, but I think we've made the transition to needing to be lifelong learners, many, many years ago. I don't know that the general population in general recognizes that, but I think that's part of our remit here, is to not create just an outcome of a student, but to create a student who can continuously evolve and grow through this change. I'm not going to be able to legislate curricula that's going to keep up with the change. And I think that what I'm confident of is that through the kinds of conversations I'm seeing my colleagues have at UT, and I know James is seeing at his, that the community will rise to the occasion like we have before. I don't know that that means that an undergraduate experience will be 4 years. I don't know that that means that more stackable credentials won't become the norm. But I think over the next 5 or 6 years, if we don't continue to press on the frontier of the idea that the technology is going to unfortunately drive more and more of the activity, social behavior, learning behavior of our students, our faculty and staff, we are truly doing them a long-term disservice. No matter how you get there, whether it's through micro-credentialing and other things, learning how to learn, learning how to reflect on your learning, it's very difficult to use Claude if you're not capable of iterating. It's very difficult to use these tools if you don't start with a baseline of wisdom and knowledge about how a system works or an environment works. You don't get that through reading a textbook. You get that through living those experiences and actively reflecting on those experiences. And my hope is that the pace of change as it changes will lead to an even greater acknowledgement of the notion that learning is a social endeavor, and sometimes that social activity happens through a conversation with yourself, and that we have to become comfortable with that. James, what are your...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think durable skills have never been sexier than they are today. Sometimes, people call them soft skills. I don't like to call them that. Things like teamwork, being able to communicate, being able to collaborate, of course, being a critical, problem solver. And when you think about some of the complaints people have about AI, it's that students are going to offload their cognition to these tools. And, I'm back to this isn't a policy problem, it's a learning design challenge. And if you construct an assessment in a way that can be gamed like that, then that's kind of on you. And I think it's on us to make sure that we're providing opportunities for students to really flex those durable skill muscles by giving them opportunities to work in small teams, to give them really challenging problems to solve, where they have to communicate the solution back to the class. Maybe they have to do a little video and talk about whatever it was. And the tools are really powerful today. I mean, I don't know if you all are using Notebook LM, but there's this incredible feature with Notebook LM where you can curate content that you feed into the tool, into the notebook, right? And it could be PDFs, websites, your own notes, your own audio recordings, whatever it might be. And then it will create all kinds of different ways to visualize the content, listen to the content, watch the content. But one of them is this deep dive audio overview. And has anybody, raise your hand if you've played around with this? Got a few people. It's fantastic. You got the man and the woman talking about the content, super dynamic. And that's all great. And some people really, that works for them. It's just another way you're watering the plants, you're taking the dog for a walk, whatever. You're on the treadmill. You can get that content in a way that's convenient for you, very appealing. But with Notebook LM, there's a new feature. I don't know if you've tried this. This is like in the last few months. There's a debate feature where it can take that content that you've fed into it and take two totally opposing sides and debate that content. You want to talk about being, critical of the content, you debate about it, right? And so I think there's an opportunity to use these tools, especially as they're evolving, to get people to be more critical of what it is that they're learning in a way that may not have even been possible previously without a lot of work on the part of the faculty member. So it allows you to scale some of these things that can then help you get more time on the mat developing those durable skills.
Thank you. My question is around this, that we know that it's very important to train students on using AI responsibly, and more importantly, students that have come straight out of high school, they're taking their first few courses, and for them especially. And so some part of training them here also involves training them on how to actually use these tools, and they evolve so fast. And so my question is, how much of the onus is on the student to be able to figure out what tools to use, how to use, and how much is it on maybe the credential that you're offering for specific tools? A, because they evolve very, very fast, and B, they may not be available through the university. So do you end up pushing them to use the tools that they have available through the university, or is it a different scenario?
Yeah, I could start. That micro-credential that's required for all of our first-year students is the first module. It's a short course in Canvas, takes only hours to complete, and the first module is essentially, how does AI work? To demystify it. Turns out if you understand how it works, you will be a much more critical consumer of the output. Yeah. So that's the first module. The second module is about responsible use, arguably the most important module. We talk about how to cite your use of the tools. It's just like you wouldn't send a robot to the gym for you, right? You're gonna get a flabby brain. So we talk about what are the trade-offs of using these tools? We talk about the environmental impacts. Many of our students are very, strong stewards of the environment. We talk about that. We talk about the human costs of the data cleaners and all of the horror around this. We put it all right on the table in that second module. The third module is about finding apps. And that's where we talk about, if it's free, you are the product, right? You're paying for it with your intellectual property, which is being used to train the underlying large language model. And that's where we also talk about things like commercial data protection, which you get with all of our enterprise tools. And then depending on who the micro-credential is for, there's some different side streets it could take. But I think that it's really important that they learn how to use these tools effectively. You need to tell the AI who it is. You have to give it a role. You have to give it some context. You have, before you give it the task, you
have to set it up for success.
You got to set it up for success, and the students don't necessarily know that. They'll just put in the task without giving it some of that important context. So I think that's on us. But I don't think it's up to every individual faculty member to do that. I think that's on the institution to do that. Yeah. And then the faculty can reinforce that.
Yeah, I think that part of our responsibility, and I think what I like about what we're doing here and what you've done across the system, is equitable access. And this is something that has been principle one for us from the start, was we were going to always have a platform that provided those protections as a baseline. And where we started, it was not a frontier model, it was not a frontier tool set, didn't have the CLI, didn't have all the wonderful things that we're all becoming addicted to, but it was a safe place for people to practice and to scaffold themselves up. Yep. My fear going forward is the speed with which the tools get announced. I mean, I was talking to the CIO of Macombs yesterday in a meeting, and I was sharing with them what we were getting ready to announce, and he said, well, you're going to lose either way. So make sure everyone has a tool in their hands. And I do think it's an institutional responsibility, but I do think that there's some onus on our students as well. They will, in K-12, in many districts, just like at many universities, arrive at a scaffold set of instructions that will help students navigate this by the time they get to our campus. In many ways, many of our students are more technically advanced than the faculty that they come to campus and learn from. And they ask questions like, why aren't you using blah? Well, because our faculty don't have the same faculty development opportunities. They don't, they're researchers. They think about different questions and different problems. So I believe because of the speed, this is going to have to be much more of a community-based, principle-based structure where we agree that if we're going to be relevant to society, we are all going to have a hand in shaping what this looks like. And if we don't get over that hump, I will be back here in 8 or 9 years saying, boy, we really screwed that up.
Yeah, I think that equity piece is so important. One of the things that we ask in that survey is we ask students how many smart devices they own. It's one of the first questions. So you own a tablet, you have a smartphone, you've got a laptop, maybe you've got a gaming console.
Got a watch.
You got a smartwatch, you got all these things. And then we look at that relative to how they're responding to the questions. And it turns out the students with more devices are warmer to AI in terms of its impact on their educational journey. They're using more AI tools. They're more confident in their use of the tools. They're paying for the tools because we ask them, are you using paid versions of these tools? What does that data tell you? AI is widening the digital divide.
That's right.
And so it is profoundly important for us to make sure that our students who can't afford these tools are not left at a disadvantage. And again, back to the data. If we didn't have that data, we couldn't say. We have evidence that this is widening the digital divide. And we've leaned into that. We've written about that. And we talk about that quite a bit with our community.
I hope all of you have noticed that James and I have not talked about data management, speed to science, network latency, contracting. All of those are table stakes. The conversation is in the room. This is the place where our AI strategies will have to emerge, not from a top-down directive, but as a response to something that is going to fundamentally change the shape and scope of what it means to be a human participant in the academy and in society. So all of the other things shake out. The contracts shake out, the legal reviews shake out. It's how we react to this new thing in our environment that is going to create a new environment. And I feel like it's part of all of our responsibilities to really lean into that mindset going forward. Instead of asking each of us for specifics, it's how do we arrive at a collective solution that actually continues to allow us to create durable skills, to go into the workplace, to have careers, to have families, to participate in society, vote for people that lead us. Everything downstream comes from this moment. And I think that my regret would be that if we can't get there. Scares the heck out of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, we have to keep students at our core. I think that is the thing that will be a big regret. If we take too much of a fear-based defensive shields up stance right now, our students are ultimately going to be the ones who suffer.
All right. Well, hey, thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today. James, thank you. What a pleasure. What a great conversation. Thanks.